This picture is super informative. So what does it tell us? And first reaction of most of the parents, and to a certain extent yours, because you were also filming here, the abdomen, is to see the entire setting, entire thorax, entire torso in the extended fashion, all the way from the mouth floor. Then as we get through the mouth floor, then there is the neck, then there is the inlet into the thorax, then we've got the outlet of the thorax, the diaphragm, so then we got the abdominal compartments, then we get to the pelvic diaphragm, and then eventually to the pelvic floor. So all these elements, they are linked within one thing, right? From the mouth floor to the pelvic floor, floor to floor, that's what you have there. That's a unified membrane that follows the whole thing. And what we see here, we can see the key challenge. When he is breathing, what is happening? What do you see here? You can see that he is expanding his abdomen, and when he's expanding his abdomen, it creates this suction effect for the entire head, which kind of gets sucked into the thorax. So that's the key challenge. Now let's analyze why is it happening and how is it affecting the reflex and the swallowing as well. So see here we've got a little bit more accentuated version here, and you see that's the part where he is bringing those sounds, right? Whether when you're supporting him or whether when he's eating, you see that's where we heard the sounds like that comes from the throat. They come from this level, right? And now let's look at the anatomy of this particular area and understand how this entire thing works. So first point, this picture is really good, and it's a good perspective that shows you how the total thing is supposed to work, right? So the good scenario, the default scenario, is the one that shows that when the child is going, or when a person goes for the breathing, you need to expand the contents of the thorax, right? So you say your lungs have to expand in order to get the air in. So what are the avenues for this? So one avenue is this expansion of the thorax, right? So it goes kind of forwards and sideways at the same time. And as you can read here, so that's what this expansion is called elevation of the ribs, right? And the movement of the sternum forwards. And here, these words here, the diaphragm descends to increase the thoracic capacity. So the diaphragm moves downwards. So in other words, to get the respiratory kind of intake, you need to expand the chest. Now, this is how it's supposed to be. But what if we look here, at the structure of the thorax, and we identify that for whatever reason, because the child was born underweight, because the child was kind of having difficulties in birth, because the child was, having all sorts of troubles in the original transition. So what happens? If some of those areas, if some of those levels and muscles and so on are not working well and not coordinating well, then achieving this result of bringing the chest up, the upper part of the chest up, and bringing the diaphragm down with the strong downwards pressure, this is not working. But then, what do you need to do? So then, you still need to bring the expansion for the lungs, right? So like at some source, in some way. And the inner lining of this entire cavity, right? So you see ventral body cavity, the inner lining of this cavity is connected. So if the ribs are not working well enough, right? So what's going to happen? then the body will need to utilize the more accessible muscles of the abdominal wall in order to still have the opportunity to get the diaphragm extension, right? To spread the ribs so that the diaphragm somehow goes down so we have the expansion of the chest wall. But if the whole thing is too weak, then what happens? As the diaphragm pulls the ribs to the sides, then these would be the muscles that actually need to contract in order to bring the diaphragm to the sides. And as that happens, so it becomes a pull through the lungs that goes all the way into the bronchial tree. And it also pulls the esophagus. So that's what we have here. See, that's what is being pulled in, both the trachea and the esophagus. And that brings the pull of the entire throat in. So that's the key challenge. The key challenge is that the coordination for the inlet of the thorax comes via the pull, which is not going through the middle here, but which goes through the spread at the side. And instead of this scenario, where the ribs nicely elevate and they move in respect to the stationary head and neck, then the whole thing gets pulled. So that's exactly what we are seeing on those pictures. So you can see it here. What is he doing, right? See, as he is using the abdominal muscles to power the diaphragm, to pull it down, to expand the room for the lungs here. So does there, because here you've got the lungs, right? You've got the lungs, and then here you've got the bronchial tree, and that bronchial tree connects to the trachea, right? So the standard picture that I hope that you remember, right? So if we pull the lungs, right? So you see if we pull the diaphragm kind of creates this downward suction, and so this whole thing pulls the trachea downwards, right? That's exactly what we see. See, as he makes a breathing movement, the head gets sucked in. That's as wrong as it gets. That's the opposite. Because you see, everything works the other way around. The way that the proper functioning of the entire swallowing system, coordination system, movement control and so on, it starts with the head.